He always thought life would follow a straight path, predictable and fair. But for Elina, every path she walked seemed lined with whispers, stares, and laughter not meant for her. At 48, she remembered every cruel word, every sneer, every quiet, judgmental glance. And she had a secret, something that would change everything. One day, the girl they laughed at would return as a force that no one could ignore, and all those who had scorned her would have no choice but to watch in disbelief. Before we dive into the full story, tell us in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more heart-touching stories. Elina stood by the window of her small apartment, staring at the city skyline. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky with shades of gold and deep amber, reflecting off the tall buildings like molten metal. She could hear the distant hum of traffic, the faint honk of a taxi, and the occasional bark of a dog somewhere far below. The air smelled faintly of coffee from the cafe downstairs and the tang of car exhaust from the busy streets. She took a deep breath, letting the scents mingle with her memories, the memories that had shaped every corner of her being. Her mind wandered back decades to the small, crowded house where she had grown up. She remembered the laughter, the cruel laughter of children at school, of cousins at family gatherings, even her own brother's voice, thick with ridicule, echoing in her ears. "Look at her, Mom. She's so different," he had said once, a sneer curling his lips as he jabbed a finger at her. Her mother had only sighed, shaking her head without words, and her father had looked away, pretending not to see. That silence, that inaction, had wounded her deeper than any insult ever could. School had been a battlefield. The hallways had smelled of wet lockers, polished floors, and fear. Every day, she had walked through those halls like a soldier entering enemy territory. Classmates whispered behind her back, pointed at her with cruel amusement, and sometimes they didn't even bother to hide their disgust. She remembered a boy in 4th grade, Samuel, who had called her the walking shadow because of her dark skin and her size. That name had clung to her like a second skin for years. At home, there was no sanctuary. Her siblings, her parents, even distant relatives had found reasons to belittle her. Her father would mutter under his breath, "She needs to be more like your brother." Her mother, instead of shielding her, would compare her achievements, or lack thereof, with neighbors' children. Elina had cried herself to sleep countless nights, wishing, praying that she could disappear, that she could melt into the world and become invisible. But somewhere inside, deep beneath the hurt, anger, and humiliation, a spark had ignited. She made a promise to herself, a promise whispered into the darkness of her bedroom late at night. One day I will show them. I will prove them all wrong. And they will see me, truly see me, and they will regret everything. The next morning, she packed a single bag. It contained only essentials, a notebook, a few changes of clothes, and the small, worn photograph of herself at 13, the one where she had smiled despite tears threatening to fall. She slipped out of the house before anyone was awake, the sound of her sneakers soft against the damp morning pavement. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with the thrill of possibility. For the first time in her life, she was running toward freedom, not away from pain. The city welcomed her like an old friend, bustling and chaotic, yet strangely comforting. She found a small apartment above a bakery, the smell of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls greeting her every morning. She took odd jobs at first, cleaning, delivering packages, and assisting at cafes. She worked tirelessly, often late into the night, fueled by a relentless determination to carve out her own identity, her own life. Years passed and Elina transformed, not physically, not by society's standards, but in ways far more profound. She learned the language of business, the rhythm of negotiation, and the subtle art of persuasion. She started small, selling handmade jewelry online, each piece infused with her creativity and her story. Her work resonated with people who had faced rejection, ridicule, and doubt. Slowly, she built a loyal following, customers who trusted not just her products but her vision. It wasn't easy. There were moments when she doubted herself, when the weight of her past threatened to crush her resolve. There were nights she cried alone, wondering if all the effort would ever matter. But she always remembered her promise, the fire in her heart that refused to be extinguished. She reminded herself that success was not merely about wealth, but about vindication, about living fully and proudly despite the scars of the past. One afternoon, a knock at her office door startled her. She looked up to see a young woman with bright eyes and an eager smile holding a tablet. "Ms. Elina?" the woman asked, her voice tinged with both excitement and nervousness. "Your presentation is about to start for the investors. They've been asking for you." Elina smiled, a calm, confident curve of her lips. She rose from her chair, smoothing the fabric of her tailored blazer over her frame. The woman's eyes widened slightly at her presence, perhaps caught off guard by the power and authority she exuded. "Thank you," Elina said, her voice steady, warm, and commanding all at once. "Let's make this count." As she walked into the conference room, the sleek glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun, she noticed the investors' faces, some skeptical, some curious, and some vaguely familiar. Among them was a man she recognized from decades past, one who had once mocked her relentlessly in school. His eyes widened when he saw her, his lips parting slightly, caught between recognition and disbelief. Elina felt a fleeting thrill, a subtle vindication. She ignored it, focusing instead on the task at hand, letting her intelligence, her charm, and her brilliance speak louder than any insult ever could. The presentation began. She spoke with clarity and passion, her hands moving with gentle precision, her voice weaving a tapestry of vision, strategy, and heartfelt conviction. Every slide, every word, every pause was deliberate, designed to capture attention and command respect. The room shifted under her presence, doubt dissolved into admiration. By the end, investors were not merely impressed, they were captivated. Offers were made, hands shook, contracts signed, and smiles exchanged. Later that evening, as she returned to her apartment, Elina allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The city lights twinkled like distant stars through her window, and the sounds of life below, the laughter, the footsteps, the faint hum of traffic, felt like a symphony of possibility. She sank into her chair, letting out a slow, satisfied breath. Years of struggle, of pain, of ridicule had led her here. She was living proof that resilience, determination, and unwavering self-belief could defy expectations. And then, unexpectedly, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find her parents, older, frail, and eyes filled with remorse. Her mother spoke first, her voice trembling. "Elina, we were wrong. We didn't see your strength, your beauty, your worth. Can you ever forgive us?" Elina studied their faces, the lines of age and regret etched deeply. She felt the old hurt flicker briefly, a shadow she had carried for decades. But she also felt a strange lightness, a sense of completion. She smiled, a quiet, victorious smile, and said, "I forgave you long ago, but now you see me truly, and that's all that matters." Her parents stood silently, tears streaming down their faces, and for the first time, Elina felt the weight of judgment lift entirely. She had conquered the world, but more importantly, she had conquered herself. She was no longer the girl who cowered in the shadows. She was Elina, strong, brilliant, unstoppable, and finally free. Elina woke the next morning to the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the small kitchen corner of her apartment. The sunlight streamed softly through the half-open blinds, painting stripes across the wooden floor. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting the warmth seep into her hands and the aroma fill her senses. For a moment, She allowed herself to revel in her success, the tangible proof that all those years of struggle had not been in vain. But success had its own trials. As her business expanded, so did the weight of responsibility. She had assembled a small but talented team, creative, driven, and fiercely loyal. Each morning, she would review sales, marketing strategies, and product designs, always seeking the smallest improvement. Elina had learned that excellence was not a goal, it was a habit, a daily ritual. One Tuesday afternoon, a knock at the office door startled her. She looked up from her laptop to see Marcus, her business partner, a tall, wiry man with sharp eyes and a wry smile. "Elina," he said, "we have a problem." His voice was calm, but his eyes held tension. Elina set her coffee down, leaning back in her chair. "Go on," she said, her tone steady, though a flicker of concern passed through her chest. "Inventory discrepancy," Marcus continued. "A large shipment of raw materials didn't arrive. We're short, and some of the orders can't be fulfilled unless we act fast." Elina's mind shifted instantly, sifting through possibilities, solutions, and contingencies. She could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline, the same feeling she had known as a girl, standing alone in a crowded schoolyard, plotting her escape from humiliation. Only now the stakes were higher, and the tools at her disposal were knowledge, experience, and instinct. "Call the supplier," she said, "and verify the shipment. I want every detail. Meanwhile, let's prioritize orders based on deadlines. No client should feel neglected." Her voice was calm, commanding, yet not harsh. Marcus nodded, impressed by the clarity of her direction. The day passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and quick strategy sessions. By late evening, Elina leaned back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. They had managed to minimize the impact, and the shipments were rerouted, saving major client contracts. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. That night, as she walked home through the city streets, the sounds and smells of life wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. The distant chatter of pedestrians, the warm scent of bread from the bakery below her apartment, the faint echo of music from a nearby cafe, all reminded her of how far she had come. But even in the quiet, a shadow lingered. Her past had a way of resurfacing, unbidden. A memory of her high school reunion flitted across her mind, a cruel evening where classmates had whispered, laughed, and judged. She remembered the knot of anxiety in her stomach as she had arrived, the burning blush on her cheeks, the sharp sting of rejection. She had walked through the crowd, head high, but inside she had been trembling. Now, decades later, those same classmates had no idea who she was, and yet she knew that one day some of them would recognize her name, her face, her achievements, and they would be forced to confront the girl they had once scorned. She smiled faintly at the thought. It was a quiet, private triumph, a vindication that required no applause. The next morning brought unexpected news. A journalist from a prominent magazine had reached out, requesting an interview. Elina hesitated briefly, wary of attention but realizing that this could be an opportunity to share her story, to inspire others who had faced ridicule, exclusion, and doubt. She spent the day preparing, choosing words carefully, crafting a narrative that balanced honesty, resilience, and hope. When the journalist arrived, Elina welcomed her warmly, offering coffee and a seat in the sunlit corner of her office. The interview began casually, the journalist asking about her products, her inspiration, and her journey. But soon the questions turned deeper. "Elina," the journalist asked, eyes curious and earnest, "your story isn't just about business success. It's about personal triumph over adversity. Can you tell me what kept you going when the world seemed against you?" Elina paused, taking a slow sip of coffee, letting the aroma anchor her. "I grew up knowing what it felt like to be underestimated, laughed at, and ignored," she began. "Every insult, every cruel word, every glance that made me feel small, it fueled something inside me. I promised myself that one day I would live fully, unapologetically, and prove that my worth wasn't determined by others' judgment. It was hard. There were days I wanted to give up, but I never did. And now, standing here, I realize that the person I've become is the answer to every doubt I ever faced." The journalist nodded, clearly moved, and the conversation flowed naturally into her professional strategies, her team, and the social impact of her business. By the time the interview ended, Elina felt a quiet pride. She had shared a part of herself that was both vulnerable and powerful. Days turned into weeks, and as her profile grew, so did the reactions. Messages flooded in, some from strangers inspired by her story, others from long-lost acquaintances shocked by her success. Among them, a message from her younger brother appeared on her phone. His words were simple but loaded. "Elina, I've been wrong. Can we meet?" Her fingers hovered over the screen. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to protect herself from the pain of past wounds. But another part, the part that had longed for reconciliation, for closure, for acknowledgement, knew that this was a moment she had to confront. She typed back cautiously, agreeing to meet, and arranged a quiet cafe downtown. The day of the meeting, Elina arrived early, dressed in a tailored suit that hugged her figure without hiding the strength in her presence. Her brother arrived late, nervous, shifting from foot to foot, eyes avoiding hers until he finally looked up. "Elina." "I don't even know where to begin," he said, voice trembling. "I was cruel, thoughtless, I'm sorry, truly." Elina studied him for a long moment, noting the sincerity in his eyes, the tremor of guilt in his voice. She allowed herself a small, measured smile. "It took me years to understand that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past," she said gently. "It's about freeing yourself from it. I forgive you. But know this, my life is mine, and I will not allow anyone to diminish it again." Her brother nodded, tears glistening, and for the first time in decades, Elina felt the heavy burden of resentment begin to lift. She realized that forgiveness wasn't weakness, it was strength, a deliberate act of reclaiming her life from the shadows of hurt. The first rains of spring had begun, soft sheets of water drumming on the pavement outside Elina's office window. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with the faint perfume of blooming jasmine from a nearby garden, creating a strangely calming scent that reminded her of childhood mornings, though the memories were bittersweet, tinged with longing and hurt. She watched the city through streaked glass, reflecting the shimmering lights of passing cars. Life seemed both chaotic and orderly, like a river carving its own path through stone. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Elina," he said, urgency in his voice, "we have a problem." Elina's pulse quickened slightly, not from fear but anticipation. She had learned to respond to crises with clarity, but she also knew that some challenges could shake even the most grounded person. "Go on," she said. "There's a leak in our supply chain. One of the major distributors isn't delivering on time, and we've got a backlog piling up. Some clients are getting frustrated." She rubbed her temple, letting her mind race through solutions. The adrenaline was familiar, like it had been during countless schoolyard humiliations, only now the stakes were higher and the outcomes could affect hundreds of lives. "Contact the alternate suppliers. Expedite shipments. I want status updates every hour," she instructed, her voice steady but authoritative. "We're going to turn this around." Hours passed, and the storm outside intensified. Rain hammered the windows with a rhythmic insistence, as if demanding attention. Elina moved through the office, phone pressed to her ear, coordinating deliveries, reassuring clients, and keeping her team motivated. By late evening, they had managed to prevent a full-scale disaster. Exhausted, she leaned back, listening to the rhythmic tapping of rain against the glass, feeling the sense of accomplishment mingle with the weariness that had become a constant companion. As she prepared to leave, her phone vibrated again. This time, it was an unfamiliar number. Curious, she answered. A soft, shaky voice greeted her. "Ms. Elina, it's me from school. You probably don't remember me, but I just want to say I'm sorry." Elina paused. Memories of high school floods rushed through her mind, whispers in corridors, cruel laughter in the cafeteria, sneers that had stung sharper than any slap. She felt a flicker of old pain, quickly tempered by the strength she had built over decades. "I remember," she said carefully, "and thank you for saying that." The voice on the other end faltered. I don't know why it took me so long, but seeing your success, it made me realize how wrong I was." Elina closed her eyes, letting the rain's cadence calm her. "We all make mistakes," she said softly. "What matters is what we do after them." The next morning, the city was drenched in sunlight, the rain replaced by a crisp clarity. Elina walked through the streets, her heels clicking against wet pavement, feeling the pulse of life around her. Every shop, every cafe, every passerby seemed to carry a story. She had built her own, full of resilience, triumph, and transformation. And yet, there was more to come. At her office, a new employee named Leela joined the team. Bright-eyed and ambitious, Leela reminded Elina of herself at 20, determined but cautious, eager but unsure. "Ms. Elina," Leela said nervously, "I've read about your story, it's inspiring." Elina smiled warmly. "Thank you, Leela. I've learned that inspiration comes from facing life, not running from it. Mistakes, failures, hardships, they're all part of the journey. Embrace them and you'll find your strength." Weeks turned into months. Elina's business expanded internationally, her products reaching corners of the world she had once only dreamed of. Investors sought her out, collaborators wanted to partner with her, and her story became a beacon for those who had faced marginalization, prejudice, and doubt. Yet success brought new challenges. One evening, while preparing for a major product launch, Elina received a letter at her apartment. It was from her father. She hesitated, fingers trembling slightly. The envelope was thick, the handwriting familiar yet foreign in tone. She tore it open carefully, revealing words laden with regret. "Elina, I have been blind to your strength, your courage, and your worth. I cannot undo the years of neglect and ridicule, but I beg for your forgiveness. Please, let us see you truly, and let us be part of your life." Elina sat in silence, the room filled with the soft hum of city life outside and the faint scent of her jasmine candle burning. Her father's words brought back a flood of memories, hurts, humiliations, and quiet betrayals, but also a strange warmth, a recognition of change, of reflection, and of the courage it took for him to reach out. She walked to the window, rain from the previous week still shimmering on the glass. The city lights flickered, reflecting like a constellation of possibilities. Her mind weighed every thought. Could she forgive? Could she embrace the past without letting it define her future? Slowly, deliberately, she replied, "I forgive. But know this, my life is mine. I will share it with those who respect it, not those who once tried to break me." Her father responded immediately, arranging a meeting, nervous and tentative. When they met, he was older, frail, yet the sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable. "Elina, I was wrong. All those years I failed you," he said quietly, voice cracking. Can we start again?" Elina studied him, noting the wrinkles carved by regret and time, the quiet humility in his posture. She felt the old anger, the shadow of pain, but it was tempered by the strength and wisdom she had gained. "We can," she said, "but only with honesty, respect, and understanding. I am no longer the girl you dismissed. I am Elina, and I deserve to be seen fully and without judgment." The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Elina's office, casting long, golden stripes across the polished wooden floors. The city below buzzed with life, the honking of cars, the distant murmur of a construction site, and the occasional cry of a street vendor calling out for customers. Elina stood by the window, sipping her coffee, her eyes scanning the skyline but her mind miles away, preoccupied with a sense of unease. She had always been vigilant, always alert to challenges, but something about this morning felt different, subtle but sharp. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete from last night's rain, mingled with the aroma of roasted coffee beans from the cafe below. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. "Elina," he said, tension threading his voice, "I need to tell you something." Her pulse quickened. She set her mug down, feeling the smooth ceramic against her palms. "Go ahead," she replied, keeping her tone steady, though a flicker of apprehension crept in. "There's someone trying to sabotage the launch," Marcus said. "We found evidence that a competitor has been tampering with shipments, spreading false information to investors, even contacting clients directly to discourage them." Elina's mind raced, mapping possibilities, outcomes, and counteractions. She had faced challenges before, but this was personal, a direct attack not just on her business, but on her reputation, the legacy she had built from years of struggle. "Do not panic," she said firmly. "We will handle this strategically. Gather all the evidence, track every communication, and document everything. I want a clear picture before I take action." The day passed in a blur. Phones rang incessantly, emails flooded in, and her team worked tirelessly to untangle the mess. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside her office, rain lashing against the windows in relentless rhythm, thunder rumbling like the voice of the city itself. Elina felt a familiar fire ignite inside her, a mixture of anger, determination, and resilience. She had fought for everything she had, and no one would take it from her without a fight. By evening, the first cracks in the sabotage became clear. A shipment had been rerouted, some client contracts were in jeopardy, but thanks to meticulous preparation and swift action, the worst had been averted. She allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction, leaning against the cool glass of the window, listening to the rain fade into a gentle drizzle. Then there was a knock on the office door. She turned to see Leela, her assistant, holding a tablet with an anxious expression. "Ms. Elina." "There's someone here to see you," she said. Elina raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Leela hesitated. "He says he's connected to your past. He won't give his name until you meet him." A chill ran down her spine, a mix of curiosity and wariness. She motioned for Leela to let him in. The door opened and a tall man stepped inside. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and carried a faint hint of familiarity. "Elina," he said, voice steady but low, "my name is Adrian. I was once a friend. And I might have some answers you've been searching for." Elina studied him, recalling fragmented memories of her early 20s, brief encounters, a mentor who had once guided her in the early stages of her business ventures. But she couldn't place him fully. "Answers about what?" she asked cautiously. "About the sabotage," he replied, "and about some of the people you've trusted. You're being manipulated, and if we don't act quickly, it could cost you everything." Her heart thumped, not from fear, but from the thrill of challenge. She had learned to face adversity head-on, but the stakes were rising to a level she hadn't fully anticipated. "Tell me everything," she said, motioning for him to sit. Over the next hour, Adrian laid out a web of deceit. A competitor had infiltrated her network, planting seeds of doubt and attempting to divert clients. There were betrayals from unexpected quarters and evidence that some supposed allies had been working against her silently. Elina listened carefully, absorbing every detail, her mind sharp, calculating, and methodical. She could feel the familiar pulse of anger and determination mingling inside her, reminding her of the girl she had been, standing alone in the hallways of her school, facing ridicule with clenched fists and quiet resolve. By the time Adrian finished, Elina stood, packing the office. "We need a plan," she said, voice firm, resolute. "We'll expose the sabotage, reclaim every lost client, and ensure that anyone who doubted me knows exactly who I am. This ends on our terms, not theirs." The following days were a whirlwind. Elina worked tirelessly, coordinating with her team, analyzing every piece of information, and carefully setting traps for the saboteurs. She felt alive in a way that only came when facing immense challenge, the adrenaline, the strategy, the quiet satisfaction of turning obstacles into opportunities. Amid this chaos, there was a softer presence in her life. Adrian stayed close, helping her navigate the labyrinth of deceit, but also offering quiet support. Elina found herself drawn to his calm confidence, the subtle warmth in his eyes, and the rare moments when he laughed softly, a sound that reminded her of simpler, happier times. It was unexpected, this budding connection, but even in the midst of battles and betrayals, Elina allowed herself a fragile hope that life could be both victorious and tender. One late night, after a grueling day of meetings and strategy sessions, Elina sat by her office window, the city lights twinkling like scattered stars below. Adrian joined her silently, offering a cup of tea. "You've built something incredible, Elina," he said softly. "Not just a business, but a life that no one can take from you. And yet, you've done it without losing yourself." She looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted. "Every step was a battle. Every victory came with doubt, fear, and exhaustion. But I promised myself something long ago, that I would live fully, unapologetically, and prove my worth. And I have, every day in ways big and small." Adrian nodded, respect and admiration evident in his gaze. "Then let's make sure the world sees that too." The confrontation with the saboteurs came suddenly. A major client meeting, carefully orchestrated, became the stage for revelation. Elina presented evidence of deceit, backed by meticulous records, emails, and intercepted communications. Faces in the room shifted, shock, disbelief, even fear flickered across expressions. Investors who had once hesitated now nodded, impressed by her command and clarity. The competitors' attempts to undermine her crumbled in real time, and Elina felt a quiet, victorious thrill. After the meeting, as she walked through the office corridor, Leela approached, eyes wide with admiration. "Ms. Elina, you did it. You really did it." Elina allowed herself a brief, triumphant smile. "We did it, Leela, together. But remember, strength isn't just about victories. It's about resilience, about standing firm when the world tries to break you, and about never letting anyone define your worth." That night, Elina returned home to her apartment, tired but elated. She poured a glass of wine, letting the warmth spread through her, and gazed out at the city lights. For the first time in her life, she felt fully in control of her life, her destiny, and her story. The past, with all its pain and cruelty, had shaped her, but it no longer confined her. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from her parents appeared. "Elina, we are proud of you, truly proud. Can we come visit?" Elina smiled, the weight of decades lifting from her shoulders. She typed back, "Yes, but only if it's with respect, honesty, and understanding. I am not the girl I used to be. I am Elina, and now we move forward." As she set the phone down, Adrian joined her once again, a soft smile on his face. "To the future," he said, raising his glass. "To the future," Elina echoed, clinking her glass against his. And in that moment, amidst city lights and lingering rain, she felt an overwhelming sense of triumph, closure, and the quiet thrill of a life reclaimed. Fully, unapologetically, and brilliantly. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming magnolias and freshly cut grass. Elina stepped onto her apartment balcony, letting the sunlight warm her face. The city was alive beneath her, bustling streets, honking taxis, chatter from sidewalk cafes, but for the first time in decades, she felt truly at peace. The battles of the past, the ridicule, the betrayals, they had all led her here. Her phone buzzed. A message from her parents. "We are on our way. Please allow us to make amends." Elina's heart fluttered, a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. She had forgiven them privately, but now they sought reconciliation in person. She took a deep breath, letting the morning light fill her with quiet strength. By noon, her parents arrived at her apartment. Her mother, older now, hair streaked with silver, eyes filled with tears and hope. Her father, tall but stooped with age, carried an air of humility Elina had never seen before. She opened the door slowly, taking in their expressions, genuine, vulnerable, and remorseful. "Elina, we are so sorry," her father began, voice cracking. "We failed you when you needed us the most. We mocked, ignored, and judged. All those years, I can't undo them, but I want you to know we see you now." Her mother stepped forward, eyes shimmering. "Our daughter, the woman you've become, we are proud, proud beyond words. Can you forgive us?" Elina paused, memories flooding, ridicule at school, whispers at family gatherings, nights she cried herself to sleep. But these were tempered by the life she had built, the victories she had earned, and the self-worth she had claimed. She placed a hand on her mother, and then on her father's shoulder. "I forgave you long ago," she said softly, her voice steady yet warm. "What matters is now, not the past. I am Elina, and my life is mine to share, and I choose to share it with honesty, respect, and love." Tears rolled down her parents' cheeks, and her father whispered, "We will honor that every day." That evening, as they sat in her apartment, the city's lights flickering outside like distant stars, the family spoke for hours, stories, regrets, laughter, and memories. It was a tentative peace at first, fragile like thin glass, but slowly it became something stronger, sturdier, filled with genuine connection. Just as the night deepened, Leela entered with a small box wrapped in golden paper. "Ms. Elina, we wanted to give you something," she said shyly. Elina opened it carefully. Inside was a plaque engraved with the words, "Elina, a life lived boldly, unapologetically, and brilliantly." Elina's eyes glistened, emotion choking her voice. "Thank you, this means more than you know." She set it on her desk, a symbol not just of success, but of survival, resilience, and triumph over a lifetime of doubt. As days passed, Elina continued to grow her business, inspire others, and live authentically. But it was not just about the empire she built, it was about the life she had reclaimed. Every challenge, every insult, every moment of isolation had forged her into the woman she had become. Unbreakable, brilliant, and unapologetically herself. Months later, a formal gathering was held at her headquarters. Investors, collaborators, friends, and family filled the sleek, sunlit hall. Cameras clicked, voices murmured in awe, and among the crowd, familiar faces from her past appeared, former classmates, colleagues, and distant relatives. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to admiration, some even bowing their heads in quiet acknowledgement. Her brother approached her, hesitant yet proud. "Elina, I see now what I could not before," he said. "You've achieved what many would have thought impossible. You've shown strength, grace, and brilliance. I am honored to be your sibling." She smiled, a radiant, triumphant smile that carried decades of struggle and triumph. "Thank you," she said softly. "Let's move forward together." The evening unfolded like a dream. Elina took the stage, her presence commanding yet approachable, as she spoke not of business strategies, but of resilience, courage, and self-belief. She shared her story candidly, the hurt, the isolation, the relentless determination, and the victories that came from believing in herself. "And to anyone listening," she said, her voice carrying over the hall, "never let anyone define your worth. Every insult, every setback, every moment of doubt. It can fuel you, shape you, and guide you to greatness. Stand tall, live boldly, and always, always believe in yourself." Applause filled the room, loud and heartfelt, echoing against the walls, the sound washing over her like a wave of triumph. Among the faces, she saw her parents, her siblings, Adrian, Leela, and her loyal team, all smiling, proud, and present. Later, as the hall emptied and quiet returned, Elina stood alone by the window, gazing at the city lights reflecting on the glass. She inhaled deeply, the night air scented faintly with jasmine and rain, and let herself feel it fully, peace, pride, and joy. She had conquered the world, but more importantly, she had conquered herself. Adrian approached quietly, standing beside her, his presence steady and warm. "You've earned this," he said softly. Elina turned, eyes sparkling. "No," she said gently, "we've earned this. Every struggle, every setback, every triumph, we've earned it together. And now the future is ours." The city below shimmered, alive with possibilities. Elina felt an overwhelming sense of completion, knowing that she had rewritten her story, not as the girl who was ridiculed, ignored, or diminished, but as the woman who stood proudly, unshakable, and brilliant in every sense. As the night deepened, she whispered to herself, almost to the wind, "I am Elina. I am strong, I am seen, and I will never let anyone dim my light again." And with that, she turned away from the window, stepping into the warmth of her life, her family, her friends, and her accomplishments, fully, unapologetically, and brilliantly. The journey of pain, struggle, and ridicule had ended, but the legacy of resilience, courage, and triumph would echo for generations. Elina had not just survived, she had conquered, and in doing so, she had illuminated a path for anyone who had ever been made to feel small, invisible, or unworthy. She was proof that life could be reclaimed, that strength could be forged from suffering, and that one person's determination could turn a lifetime of doubt into a symphony of triumph. And for the first time, truly, she smiled, because she had become everything she had ever promised herself she would be.